Hello, Encinitas families and staff. I wanted to share a few updates with you before we go off onto October break. So a few things I wanted to share this morning, our current hybrid status in Encinitas, our updated local statistics, and then also updated information on next steps and what does that look like for full reopening, because that's certainly a question we continue to hear. So always starting back with our priority, which is to ensure our students and staff confidently return to a safe work environment conducive for learning and work. We know that's important for our families and for our staff, and that has been in the forefront of all of our planning. So what does it look like now as far as our status of hybrid? We went to hybrid for a very specific reason, and that continues to be an important anchor for us. Our California Department of Public Health and the Center for Disease Control both outline guidelines for school districts and schools to follow and give us parameters. Part of those parameters include the idea of small cohorts, so small groups of students that act as a household together, so to speak, and stay together, play together, work together, and then also to be able to do as much physical distancing as possible. We know that the virus is spread most frequently person to person, so if we can keep that distance as great as possible, that gives us a way to mitigate risk in the best possible way. Our current classroom cohorts are no larger than 16 students. We have cohorts as small as 8 and as large as 16, but we have none above 16 at this time. And that's allowed us to have that maximum spacing, both in the classrooms and then across the campus and before and after school as well. So what does that look like? Here are just some examples of what learning looks like on in-person days. So we have students spread out in desks, and you see empty desks that are kind of in between students to keep that distance. We see some outdoor learning, which is a possibility at all of our sites for all of our classrooms to use as teachers see fit. We see small group instruction where we have the plexiglass barriers, because that's at a time where teachers are closer to students than the 6 feet that is measured by the guidelines for teacher to student distance. And then obviously on the right-hand side, some of our larger classes, you see 15 to 16 students that again are spread out where they have maximum spacing as best as possible. Students with their own materials, and then we see students in some of our smaller grades with different barriers or markers in between the two desks. We have lunch zones and limited lunch seating, so students are spread out. We know lunchtime is actually the most vulnerable time because this is the time where our students are not wearing masks, and so it is very important to us that we keep the distance from them. And then make sure that as they get up every day from lunch, they're immediately washing hands and also wearing masks. We're using the zones at all of our schools so that that keeps that cohort together and allows them to play together and be safe and not mingle with other groups. Students have every classroom has their own set of equipment. They have green spaces, a variety of activities as they go from zone to zone each day or each week, always staying with that same group of kids to reduce the number of mixing of students as outlined in the California Department of Public Health guidelines. Our enrichment classes are done either outside or the teacher pushing into the classroom with space that allows our students to have some interesting extracurricular activities at school, but limited amounts with only 30 minutes per day. And then obviously on the right-hand side, we have students who are doing PE and learning how to throw the football with a very distance opportunity so that they can actually have a mask break at the same time. And one of the things I want to point out is going to schools on a regular basis, I'm able to say that we are truly implementing the guidelines as best as possible. What I see when I'm walking around campuses gives me confidence in the work that our students are doing and that our staff is doing to really use those protocols with fidelity and make sure that they are using the safest practices possible. And that's important because that allows us as staff members to be confident and allows our parents also to be confident in what's happening at school for their children's safety. I did want to point out, we did close our survey this week, and we really appreciate all the survey responses we received from staff and from parents. And I'm just going to highlight a few of these. The PDF of this presentation is also in the email. So if you want to come back and look at this a little bit closer, these surveys will be using those with groups of teachers and staff to kind of plan out our next steps. How do we continually improve? I will note that you'll see a lot of consistencies between both the parent survey, the teacher survey, and the staff survey, as we recognize some of the same bumps that we all have with the hybrid model. Most of all, everyone recognizes having students back in school has been really helpful to students' happiness and their academics, socially and emotionally. Our parents note how hard our teachers are working. They recognize everybody on both sides have said how masks are far better than that we had all expected. Uh, Parents appreciate the smaller class size, that the individual attention their students are getting, and that the communication has been a positive aspect during this situation. What's not working well for parents, it's in some cases 34 of our 600 respondents said it's not enough work. We had then too much work or busy work from 20 of our families. Uh, Both teachers and families noted how difficult it is on those at-home days for independent work. There's Parents noted the interest in having Fridays be in-person days, and the concerns about not enough teacher to student interactions, too much screen time at home. And then we did have some families very clearly noting that although this is really hard and challenging, they recognize that they don't want to return to full in-person too quickly because the safety protocols are so important. And then we had another set of parents who really desire us to come back 5 days a week. The concerns from some families about not having enough feedback on the work that's being submitted. And then 31 of our families noted that they prefer not to have live enrichment lessons during the in-person days. And then we also had parents who noted concern about the recorded enrichment days. And then another one is just comments about not having enough mass breaks during the day. Now, when we look at the teacher survey, teachers are recognizing lots of individualized and personalized learning, increased productivity. They've noted that the behaviors are almost non-existent because of this physical distancing as well as the small numbers. Just that, we're all rejuvenated by having kids back on campus. Teachers feeling like they're getting more valid assessment data now that students are back. And that they appreciate that our special education students are 4 days in person, and they appreciate having Fridays to collaborate and plan, and also the staggered opening and closing and the playground zones. When we look at what's not working so well for our teachers, obviously balancing and managing both the at home and the in school. The amount of work, we recognize it is exhausting. So much is having to be done outside of the school day, trying to manage all of these platforms and having to plan so far in advance. There is concern that teachers are not able to support the at-home learning as well. And certainly, as I mentioned before, students are not completing as much work now that they're doing at-home work compared to when they were doing distance learning. It's difficult for students to wear masks, but it's also difficult for our teachers to wear a mask all day. And when they're talking all day and trying to project their voice, it can be difficult. The daily Zooms are hard for a variety of reasons, and teachers feel like they're not getting enough of the break times during the school day. And obviously, our teachers have said it's not enough just to do two live in-person days. And we're still managing all of the protocols when students are getting sick at school. In the classified survey, we look at appreciating the smaller class sizes, the designated zones of work, the mask wearing, the prep on Fridays, all of the PPE that's been provided, where we have 2 classrooms for our SDC programs. That's been positive, as well as not having visitors or parents on campus. Obviously, the temperature checks and the support. What's not working well is how hard and how much time it takes to disinfect. And then obviously with some of our specialized programs, there's intermingling of students from different classes. Um, when we have students who aren't keeping their mask on, or the need to really have close contact with our younger students. And then, technology is always a difficulty for us when we have connectivity issues. And oftentimes we're seeing students struggling on their off days, and with distractions that are around them, whether they're at the YMCA or other places, even at home, it's hard to keep that attention. And then, substitutes not being COVID tested. And then just, we all struggle with not being able to be as available to our students on their at-home days. So with these 3 surveys, we'll be meeting and really making some concrete decisions about how do we refine and improve what we're doing, so that we can continue to support teachers and staff, but also continue to support our families and our student learning, which of course is at the center of what we are looking to do. I just want to remind everybody about our EUSD dashboard on our website. We're keeping track of any active cases. As of today, when I'm taping this, we have 1 employee and 4 student cases across the district. And then these are only on the dashboard as they're active. The cumulative cases, we could keep track of that, but what we want to always demonstrate on the dashboard is what's happening right now, because that's real-time data and allows us to make the best decisions possible. And then what the current guidance is, I think it's important to always look at when we start to say what's next, how are we evaluating the risk of what we're doing currently and what we hope to do in the future. We know that our goal, as always, will be to try to bring all students back, but only when it's safe to do so. So we want to look at what does that mean currently. We, have been in the distance learning before because of schools being closed for the public health orders. And then as we were allowed to open, knowing that distancing and limited capacity were important, that's what got us to hybrid. And then we're really, looking at that green arrow. When are we able to get there where we're able to open with safety precautions and have full attendance? A couple of things that we're looking at to make sure that we are considering all the necessary logistics and science and data, medical opinions to move to the next phase. We want to look at local cases. We want to look at the county system. We want to look at public health orders, the CDPH guidance. We know that the social emotional part of this is really difficult for all, so we want to be cognizant of that. And then we also know that a gradual return is the safest, most methodical way to do this, to keep our protocols and our procedures tight, and make sure that they are being implemented across school sites systematically. So our current data is between 6.5 and 6.8. We see this number varying a little bit over each week, but community outbreaks has been a higher number, and then our testing positivity rate, it has been consistently good. So when we're looking at where we are now compared to when we opened, we have not seen a downward trend at this time. This number has fluctuated a bit. We are definitely still in the red tier for San Diego County. And then we really have been drilling down into our local data, and we've had, unfortunately, a negative trend, or a trend of increased cases in the area of Encinitas and our zip code. So we moved from 2.52 to 4.29 to this week being at a 6.31. And if you think of that 6.31 in the same way as we look at the tiers, that puts us in the red. This would tell us that prior to us opening, we were doing better than the county, and now we're in line with the county. So it's important to note, because at this time we're not seeing it being less spread in our area. There is new guidance from the CDE for schools, and they look at the number of cases per 14 days. You'll see that there's 3 different boxes under each of these columns. These aren't supposed to be all in total, but you're looking at where you fall in these different ranges. For example, when we look at what we're able to do to mitigate risk, We know that we are really great with the consistent and correct use of masks. We know that we're really great with hygiene and disinfecting. Where we aren't as strong is the physical distancing, because we know returning back, we were not able to do 6 feet, but we do as much as we can. And with our hybrid model, that's allowed us to have a larger distance, but certainly not the 6 feet. That would be the greatest extent possible. So when we look at this chart and we find where we are with our local cases on the 14-day window, we see that the 28 is for the 92009, which is our Carlsbad schools, and then we see 64 cases per 100,000 in this 2-week window in Encinitas, and that puts us in that higher risk category, which is again that same tier almost as when we looked at the red substantial tier in the county data. So that's still consistent that we're still in an elevated area. So I also wanted to point out our classroom size. Both our classroom size physically is smaller in some cases, as we have classroom sizes that are less than other surrounding districts because of how we've configured them after class size reduction. But looking at the number of students in our classes is really important, because that's a local context and local logistics that is really necessary as we plan. Our classes are the lowest enrollment that we've had. We certainly have worked diligently to reduce the number of combos we have in our district, but also to keep our class sizes low so that we haven't collapsed classes when we've had students move to cloud, and really wanting to maintain consistency for our students as best as possible. So when we look at our numbers, you'll see obviously we have the lowest numbers in our K2 classes, and then our third grade is about split. But we have about 40% of our classes are 20 or less, and then 60% are 21 or more. Some surrounding districts, such as Rancho Santa Fe, Del Mar, and Solana Beach, they have class sizes that would have 100% or almost 100% on this left-hand column, which is very different than the reality that we have. So that's important, because as we look at bringing students back, the more students we bring back, the larger the cohort is, and the less distancing we can do. So my proposal at this point, in working with our team, is to gather staff and teachers and administration together, look at these considerations that we have in front of us, the local cases, the county tier system, the San Diego County of Office metrics, look at our class sizes, look at our physical spacings, and start to have the conversation about what is the next steps for phasing more students to in-person learning beginning in January, if the metrics and the current context at the time deems that it is appropriate and safe to do so. And why January? I think it's important to note that we have 6 weeks upon the return from fall break to winter break, 6 weeks of instructional time. And we want to make sure that during that time, we provide ample planning, provide ample time to make adjustments, and also we recognize that coming back from a couple of holidays and a couple of breaks, we want to be thoughtful and safe in our return to make sure that we are implementing our procedures with the safest possible measures. We want to ensure that even if we have cases in our district, that there isn't transmission or spread in our district, which is really an important factor as we look to keep our community safe and our students and our staff safe. We want to make sure the timeline that we determine supports safety and also learning theory. We want to make sure that we're looking at the instructional time in the best light possible. We are intending to present the potential timeline, logistics, and the metrics that we'll be using for that next phase of reopening in November to our school board. So hopefully that kind of gives you an update on where we are and where we're headed. I really appreciate your time, and know that we are very fortunate in our community that we have tremendous involvement and tremendous interest in making sure we're all doing the best we can for our students and keeping them safe. Thank you.